Welcome to Growth Colony, Australia's B2B growth podcast. I'm Alex Hipwell. Each episode, we bring you B2B founders, CMOs, marketing and sales leaders to find out what makes them successful and what was behind their failures. Let's dive right in.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the pod. I'm Shahin Hoda with Xgrowth, and today I'm talking to Malcolm Hamilton, Global Marketing Director at SAP, about how can companies with a strong technical background introduce marketing in their organization and create an environment for it to thrive. Malcolm, thanks for joining us.
My great pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
No, it's great to have you. This topic hits home for me on many different angles. My background is electrical engineering. I mean, by education is electrical engineering, and I know there's a shift that needs to happen for engineers to start to think in marketing language, right? And that's sometimes challenging to do so, especially if it's a company that is founded by a technical founder or technical owner and they got to make that shift. First of all, how would you describe the initial approach that technical leaders take? Someone with an engineering background or technical background, they take towards marketing. What do you see?
Interesting. Actually, interestingly enough, some of the top-notch marketeers that I know personally have an engineering background, both mechanical engineering and electronic engineering. So I'm not quite sure what that means, but I guess I often reference this when I'm talking to our business partners and my colleagues, that there's this dynamic that marketing is regarded as a right brain creative skill, okay? And technical, analytical skill is left brain. So typically a lot of leaders of businesses in IT come from a technical background and often come from that left brain space. So they are challenged by marketing, candidly. They find it difficult to understand the dynamics of what effective marketing is. Whereas those folks that come from right-brained environment thrive in the marketing space. But what is happening really quickly is that both those dynamics are merging. So the left brain folks that are in leadership positions are having to adapt, having to change and move really quickly, given the massive paradigm shifts we're all experiencing in B2B and B2C commerce today. So that's a very real dynamic where I'm meeting with senior leaders from our partners around the world, and very often they have a left brain discipline, and they're on this journey because they have to be.
What do you think? And I want to get into the nitty gritty of people getting on this journey, but what are some of the challenges that you see people having when they have that left brain approach to, and then they also try to introduce marketing?
Yeah, it's just having that innate ability to be creative from a marketing perspective. Marketing is a creative exercise. I'm not saying that left brain people are not creative, that they're just creative in a different way. And I know it's really dangerous to overgeneralize, but if I'm in a room of strangers meeting new partners in a room, I can almost pick, after they've introduced themselves, just their names, I can almost tell you within minutes which are the left brain, which are the right brain, by the way they communicate, the way they dress, the way they talk generally. But all I can say to you is anecdotally, with few exceptions, those left brain individuals, and candidly in the IT channel, very large percentage of proprietors, leaders in the IT channel come from a left brain technical background. They've either worked for a large vendor in the technical space and decided to launch a business of their own for all the right reasons. And they usually launch it and open it with peers, colleagues, friends that are also left brain. So you often meet business partners that are predominantly left-brained in the way they think. So one of the things that we are always saying to partners is you really must think about bringing a marketeer with right brain marketing disciplines into your business and allow that individual a seat at the leadership table to help you reconsider your go-to-market strategy, your value prop, all those things that marketers can do very readily that often technical people find difficult.
It's like deja vu talking to you about this right now. One of the other things that I feel, and I had this challenge with, was, coming from an engineering background, you work with a certain level of certainty, right? And there is the inputs of A, B, and C that goes in, and it gives you D. Where in marketing is not as black and white as that, and that was something for me that was always a bit of a challenge to get used to, that, hey, it's not as black and white. You're dealing with people now. You're dealing with that level of uncertainty from people in the marketing space. And that level of uncertainty was something that I was not fully comfortable with. Is that something that you see as well?
A lot. And in fact, I'll resist using cliches and buzz terms, but there is this really important dynamic which successful businesses right now are adapting to. And it's a term called customer centricity. And historically, marketing and sales have been targeting company identities, right? Without necessarily doing any research in terms of the human beings that reside within that business, what we call line of business leaders. So if you're attempting to sell to any business, large, medium, or small, if you're pitching a message to the CFO, Chief Financial Officer, they have very different buying drivers to a CMO or to the CEO. This isn't rocket science, and it's not new to a lot of people that will be listening to your podcast. But what is fundamentally true today is you'd better understand who your customer is in terms of their buying drivers and what makes them tick, what makes them want to respond to anything that you are saying to them. Because what happens all too often is marketers and sales pitch the wrong message to the wrong person. And guess what? They then get surprised that there's no result.
Yeah.
And that there's things like called account-based marketing. Another term is called the ideal customer profile. What does your ideal customer look like? And of course, that to some extent is size of company, geography, industry, all those things. But today, it's especially critical to bringing that factor that you're dealing with human beings that right now have very, very different buying drivers than they did even 6 months ago, 9 months ago. They're selecting vendors, predominantly 80% of that buyer's journey is done independently without the vendor or the salesperson engaging. So the science of marketing today is making sure that any kind of messaging speaks to the language of that ideal customer profile. That's the science right now, is speaking to those roles, but not only speaking to those roles by buying drivers, but also speaking to them aligned to what we call the buyer's journey. So it's always been a science, but no more so than now.
Again, before we get into there, tell me a little bit about some of the consequences of not being customer centric, not thinking about the customer as a human being and looking at the account, and not only at the account, but also at the personas within that account. What are some of the consequences that you see in the market when organizations don't do that, and they kind of follow that same trajectory of, hey, we only work with technical people, we only work with left-minded people, we rely on our network of people that we know, and that's the path that they're taking forward. What are some of the consequences that organizations face in that situation?
Think about the way right now that all of us are constantly on digital platforms, whether it's a mobile phone, whether it's a laptop, whether it's a TV, whatever it is. We are being bombarded with thousands of messages a day. And we have this innate ability to disregard 99% of them. And the reason we disregard 99% of them is because our instincts and our brain tells us irrelevant, irrelevant, irrelevant. Click, close, swipe. Those decisions that are made in milliseconds. So going back to your question, the danger with not delivering the right kind of content constructed to the buyer's journey and the buyer's drivers means you are instantly irrelevant. Instantly. You can, to a certain extent, trade off the brand that you represent as a marketer to some extent. But frankly, most buyers today, decision makers, are making decisions in seconds as to whether you're relevant or not. So if you pitch anything to a decision maker, regardless of role, it needs to be highly relevant to their buying drivers. They need to perceive value to what you are pitching to them, what you're presenting to them. And fundamentally, it must not be salesy. Anything that's too salesy right now is disregarded. And again, I keep saying to our business partners around the world, and it's again, it's going to sound cliched, but it's a skill, and that is put yourself in the mind and body of the individual that you are targeting right now. What age group are they? So, for instance, there's some research that was recently published that said by a global respected analyst that said over 50% of decision makers in a buying cycle in IT now are millennials. Now that's okay, whether you believe it or not, there's a high percentage that are millennials. Millennials buy and select vendors fundamentally differently to someone like me, for instance, a baby boomer. Their buying drivers are fundamentally different. They want to receive messaging that empathizes with their values. And if you don't empathize with their values, they disregard you in a second. So that's the impact of a left brain leader or left brain anything in a business not being willing or prepared to address that dynamic, because right now they'll be missing huge opportunity to address that dynamic. And as a result, if you do address that dynamic, send messaging to prospects aligned to their buying drivers, you're going to get cut through. They're not going to disregard you, and they'll engage. And you will embed, you'll engage in sales cycles that the competition doesn't even know exists.
Interesting.
Very long answer to your question, but
no, it's good. It's good. I think you raise a few very interesting points, which kind of dovetails really nicely into my next question about, okay, we get it. We have to be customer focused. We have to align ourselves to the customer. We have to understand our customer. And that sounds like the first step that IT organizations need to take in order to be able to create a successful marketing or demand engine for their organization. Where do they go from there? Let's say I'm an IT company, and I've made the decision that, okay, we need to put a more strategic focus on marketing. I'm a technical founder, and I've brought in maybe a head of marketing now, and they're trying to understand who our customer is. Where do I go from there? What's the, how does my trajectory of progress going to look like?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, because so often to be able to pull that information, all of the information you've just referenced, is actually quite a challenging task, right? And it's the secret sauce. If you're able to identify who your ideal customer profile is and ask yourself some simple questions like, regardless of whether you're technical or not, a leader, where are we consistently going into opportunities, potential deals, and losing? What's our win-loss rate when we target that particular business or that particular industry with this particular solution? Well, common sense and logic would say, if our loss rate is high, we should stop targeting it. But there's this tendency for businesses to say, this is the market we really should be owning and we should be targeting, because we just want to, without having all that analysis on the back end as to whether or not what you're offering to that target market really is a relevant solution. The secret sauce is to understand where you consistently win by industry, by role, by company size, with the type of solution. And the extension of that is, once you've done that research, well, we consistently win in discrete manufacturing, companies that turn over 500 million and below with an HR solution. Well, Blind Freddy would then say, well, in that case, it's about finding more like that. In other words, taking a laser beam approach to marketing rather than the tendency to do something we call spray and pray, which is just target anyone, right? Because often, frankly, leadership for any business, I've seen it and heard it many, many times, where leadership will say to marketing, we've just gone through our sales pipeline, it's looking a bit thin. We need more leads, more leads. Just send out 10,000 emails, get a database from a database vendor, and just send out 10,000 emails. And we're bound to get at least 3 or 4 leads from that. We'll end up probably closing one. And that conversation happens all the time. Whereas the most successful vendors that we deal with, the successful partners, understand that the other dynamic, which is laser beam marketing. So going back to your question, it's a tough discussion to have with a non-market, a leader that doesn't understand marketing. The good conversation to have is when a leader who has a technical background knows, he or she knows that they don't know, and they need to bring that skill set into the business. And once that happens, providing they recruit well, that marketer they bring into the business becomes a strategic advisor to the business to guide the business on that go-to-market strategy. Not always an easy conversation to have. It's change management. But this is why increasingly businesses around the world are becoming marketing-led, not sales-led.
I want to come back to that point, being marketing-led, but and not sales-led. But the other thing that I want to point out that you just talked about is that they bring somebody on board, and it's hard to adapt the process because it needs change management. And one of the things I've seen is patience runs out with marketing, and it's
absolutely,
and it's like, it's not working, kill it. Have you seen anything similar to that? What is your experience with patience running thin?
Well, SAP, who I work for, we have over 23,000 partners in our ecosystem, and they range from transnationals, many names that we'd all know, right down to the small businesses with maybe 6 to 8 staff. And I hear this in companies large, medium, and small. And that is, to your point, patience wears thin really quickly. And that's one of the biggest challenges, because sales are hungry for leads, more leads. That's marketing needs to generate more leads. No, marketing needs to generate better leads is the discussion. Leads that we are more likely to close. And if you have that spray and pray approach, and you do end up with, you target 10,000 individuals or companies, and you generate those 5 leads, the chances of you closing any of those 5 leads are significantly reduced, because they've just moved into a marketing phase or a sales phase, and they just don't buy. So again, back to your question, the change management is where leadership has faith and trust in marketing's guidance. So marketing's role should be at the leadership table, talking about and contributing to the discussion around where are our best fit target markets, by company size, by role, by industry, by geo. And let's build a strategy to dominate those target markets, not own a piece of it, but dominate it. And good marketeers are eminently qualified to be able to have those conversations with leadership. But to your point, in terms of patience, what happens, many marketing strategies can take up to a year before you see ROI, if not longer. A case in point, for instance, is, let's say it's anything relating to social media. Social media historically was not seen as a viable mechanism with which to generate business. Candidly, today, without it, many businesses wouldn't be around for very long. It's fundamentally key. But a social media strategy or a digital marketing strategy takes time to build. It takes time to execute. And often, depending on what the initiative is, it can take 6, 9, 12 months before you start seeing ROI. And that's when leadership start to lose patience. When are the leads coming? When are the leads coming in? You've been running this LinkedIn campaign now for 6 months. We're not seeing enough leads. So marketing straight away are in this defensive position, being forced to move into a tactical role rather than strategic. And successful businesses are those where, in my unequivocal experience meeting thousands of partners a year around the globe, it's when leadership has faith and trust in marketing as a thought leader within their business, and they have the patience to realize that it's not a rapid, okay, you might be lucky and get short-term ROI depending on what it is, but historically, if it's done well, it takes patience, time, until you start to get run rate. But once it's well tuned, well structured, and you're targeting the right market, your cost of acquisition significantly drops. So, leads coming into the business are high quality. Sales are happy because they've got good opportunities to work on. The CEO is very happy because the win rate is much higher, and net higher revenues, higher margins.
Yeah, everybody's happy. Everybody's on their good side.
Yeah.
Do you ever find yourself stuck with a B2B problem? Need a second opinion on your next campaign? Or looking for some feedback on that piece of MarTech you're thinking to purchase? Well, that's why we created the Growth Colony Slack channel. This Slack channel is like a small dinner party where you get to meet and mingle with B2B professionals, hear what others are doing, and keep up to date with the latest B2B trends and news. You'll also get access to a range of exclusive content from our podcasts, webinars, and events. The best thing about it? It's all free. If this sounds interesting, head over to growthcolony.org/Slack and sign up. That's growthcolony.org/Slack.
Malcolm, earlier you mentioned organizations, especially IT companies, are becoming more marketing-led than sales-led. What do you mean by that?
I guess it goes back to that topic where I say that marketing needs to be at the leadership table to have the discussion around what market should we be targeting at all. Because historically, sales have been leading those discussions. Sales have been saying we should be targeting this industry. And often historically, those recommendations from sales has been based on where they've won the occasional deal, the relationship salespeople already have with decision makers. But candidly, the elephant in the room is salespeople typically tend to work where they feel comfortable, right? And that's human nature. And it's tough to move out of that space and say, target a different type of customer. So marketing's role is to do a number of things at the leadership table, but from a strategic guidance perspective, the CEO, when he or she are having pipeline review discussions with sales, marketing needs to be sat at the table as well, or on the Zoom or on the Teams. Because if there's a delta, if there's not sufficient pipeline velocity, new pipeline velocity, historically sales have said, well, let's go here, 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 and here. And they do, and you can't do that anymore. Marketing needs to be at the table to say, we've done some research using digital platforms. We see an opportunity here, 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 and here. And the way they determine those opportunities, marketing this is leveraging digital platforms, what we call social listening from a marketing perspective. It's marketing's job to do that. And marketing's in a position then to provide leadership with guidance where to aim their limited gunpowder as opposed to spray and pray. So any CEO of any business right now needs to have marketing involved in those strategic discussions. And marketing has to have the courage to say, you know what, we shouldn't go there. We shouldn't target that market. Why? Because we've done some analysis and we'll be spinning cycles and our loss rate will be very high. Let's think about another market. The other reason successful businesses are becoming marketing-led is back to that other term, customer centricity. And whether it's B2C or B2B, marketing is influencing everything we are doing right now, everything we are doing. We just often don't know it in terms of what we buy. where we go to restaurants, what movie we see, what clothes we buy. And you might say, well, marketing's always done that. Yes, but differently. This is being done using platforms like artificial intelligence, machine learning, where successful marketeers are leveraging leading edge digital platforms to get inside our heads, to influence our decision-making processes. And an industry that got this 5 years ago is retail. Retail have been doing this for at least 5 years. Successful retailers today leverage marketing and technology supremely well. IT is a little bit of catch up, but it's happening.
Yeah, it is. It is fascinating to see the changes that are happening in the marketing space and what is going on. And I feel like the retail with the recent changes and in some of the tracking capabilities, they're having a interesting time as well with Facebook and Google. But I think we will sit and watch what unfolds in that space.
For sure.
Malcolm, are there any other challenges that you've come across, or anything that maybe I haven't touched on this topic that you think it's worth covering here?
Yeah, it goes back. There's many actually, but it goes back to that term, which was actually first coined by an Australian, a guy called Hugh McFarlane, way back in 2003. I know Hugh very well. It's called the buyer's journey, right? It's a term now that's ubiquitous everywhere. You hear the buyer's journey. Well, what does the buyer's journey mean? And what it essentially means that all of us, we're all buyers. We go through some kind of journey in terms of buying anything, whether it's piece of furniture, a TV, a car, selecting a vendor, whatever. We subconsciously and consciously go through some kind of journey. From the very beginning, where we don't think we need this thing, somebody has done a really good job at getting inside our heads to say, you know what, you actually do. You do need this thing that you didn't think you needed, right? That's what brilliant marketing does. It gets inside our heads and conditions our thought process, firstly subconsciously, and then consciously. And the science of effective marketing with that customer at the center is to ensure that the business is communicating with those humans, those individuals, providing information, both either push or pull, that's relevant to the buyer in their journey. So what does that mean? It means certain types of content can be made available to a potential customer while they're exploring. Right? They're just looking. They're invisible to you potentially, but they're on Google or other platforms, and they're looking. You don't know they're looking, and they might work. If you're doing a good job with your SEO, your search engine optimization, they might well stumble upon you, your brand, and they might well have a look at you. You may not necessarily know it. So then the prospect moves into a kind of a vendor selection, a shortlist, if you will. Historically, sales have been driving this, right? Sales have been driving this, driving the prospects forward. But unanimous consensus from experts around the world is 80% of the buyer's journey is self-empowered today, especially now with, we're not able to get about, we're not able to go to events, not able to shop as much as we used to. So that means if 80% of the buyer's journey is self-empowered, as individuals, businesses better make sure that they're highly visible during that 80% of the journey, that they're providing relevant information timely, but critically aligned to the phase that the buyer is in their journey. Now, that's a long answer to your question once again, but that's the science. That's using technology, understanding where the buyer is, the individual human being in that process. Now, there are tools that help businesses address that dynamic, like marketing automation tools, but they're not a set and forget, and they're not fail-safe. You really need to do some science and research around your ideal customer profile. What makes them tick? What kind of information is relevant to them? What's valuable? But when do you deliver it to them? When do you make it available? Is it a blog? Is it a podcast? Is it a white paper? Is it just a small hi, hello, my name is on LinkedIn? And an analogy I use is this. If you, for instance, have received a piece of information from somebody trying to say, hi, this is our company, this is what we do, and you ignore it, right? Because you think, oh, more information. They send it to you again in another way, you ignore it. It doesn't mean you're not interested, but you just ignore it for now. And then it comes to you from another platform, maybe. And then you go, okay, I'm going to, I'll click and I'll have a look, right? So that's what we call the explore phase of the buyer's journey. And buyers are moving in and out of that dynamic all of the time. It's not that they're not interested, it's just that they're saying not right now. So the science, and then when they move into the evaluation phase, they're actually shortlisting vendors without actually interacting with anyone. It's all done themselves. Now that is both super scary and a super opportunity, because it means that your competitors don't know that this buyer is researching. If you know, you can be the one that shapes that buyer's understanding of what they think they need. That's the science for companies today, where marketing is so important. Marketeers, smart, good marketeers, do that in their sleep. That's what they do.
Smart, good marketeers. Okay. I want to actually come back to this point. You talked about a few things. You talked about, you have to understand where your customer is, because, hey, you might get that LinkedIn message that we all get about, hey, we offer software development. Do you need any help? And you ignore it. And then you get it on another channel or in another format, and you respond. You talked about, the kind of push and pull processes and methodologies. And you also mentioned that these are not fail-safe. We, in our agency, we work with quite a lot of TSPs. We call it technology service providers. And almost there is no instance that we talk to somebody and they turn and say, oh, you know what? I don't want to talk to marketing people or marketing agencies. We did Facebook and LinkedIn ads with somebody, or SEO, and they promised us the world and it didn't work. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. And you might have heard this as well. I'm not sure if you've come across this, that, hey, yes, Malcolm, we did some marketing, we did some SEO, and we did some ads. It didn't work. And I feel like part of that is to, hey, you need to give it time. But there might be other elements as well. What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on the fact, you mentioned where is important, but you also mentioned that it's not fail safe. What would you say to a IT company that brings that up?
One of our partners, you mean? Well, so often when we've looked at that, and we do all the time, we work with agencies, small, medium, and very large around the world, of course. What does success look like, right? From a client perspective, success is leads. Success is net new revenue, right? But what often happens is, candidly, the brief is wrong. Right at the beginning, the brief is not really what the customer needs, right? And either there's a disconnect between the brief in terms of what the customer feel they need and what the agency are actually delivering, right? There needs to be very clear, crystal clear brief in terms of what the customer wants and is expecting from you, the vendor, the agency, and in terms of what does success look like. So often there's a disconnect because the output from the agency's perspective, we've exceeded what we said we would deliver.
We've given you a lot of MQLs, right? You got plenty of those.
Well, there's a very good point. What's an MQ? What's a marketing qualified lead? What is it? And candidly, we've heard from agencies that say, well, a lead is when somebody fills out a landing page from an email campaign. It's not. A lead is, sometimes leads get passed when they've determined that somebody has a pulse. A lead shouldn't be passed until such time as that lead has been qualified, because there's a number of things that happen there. Number one, it perpetuates the perception from sales that marketing are not adding value, because all that happens is leads are being passed to them, which when sales ring the prospect and the prospect says, "Who are you? Why are you calling me? All I did was fill out a questionnaire on your website."
Just interested in the ebook.
Yeah. And look, there's a lot to be considered when that happens. If any business, whether they're large, medium, or small, operate that way just by driving interest, tacit interest, and regarding them, and then engaging sales too soon, they're actually damaging their brand. So if you think about it in your own world, you may have expressed some kind of interest, loose interest in some way. And then you get a phone call from a salesperson that says, "Hi, I understand you're very interested in our product. Can I arrange a sales call? Can I arrange to meet you?"
You're like, no.
Excuse me, who are you and what's this about and who do you represent? And it's the golden rule. And it's always been a golden rule, but it's especially a golden rule now, because everyone's in terms of outreach is on digital. We're all being bombarded by messaging. And if we get approached with the wrong message at the wrong time, with a message which has no relevance or value, it's pretty obvious what you think about the brand. And the other thing is you tell other people about that, because you can, you put it on your Facebook, "Don't deal with this organization, they've done this," or, how often do you get messages from social platforms that says, "Be careful with this particular organization." Now, I'm being simplistic, but today successful businesses that understand the customer's buying drivers, that understand their journey, and message to them respecting all of those dynamics will succeed. They will grow. But those that don't, no, they won't survive.
Malcolm, this is awesome, but I have a couple of last questions, and these are rapid questions that I want to ask you, and I ask everybody who comes on our podcast about these.
Sure.
So let's go through them. The first question that I want to ask is what is one resource, book, blog, podcast, talk, whatever it is, that fundamentally changed the way you work or live?
Work or live?
Work or live. I mean, something that had a big impact in how you see the world. It could be from a professional standpoint, could be from even from life standpoint. But it was one piece of content and resource that you went through.
Well, you can probably gather by my profile, I'm over 65, so I'm looking at living a long life and keeping myself fit and well. So there's a podcast actually called LLAMA. It's an acronym. Live Long and Master Aging, which is a podcast which is actually delivered by a BBC journalist that's based in the States. He's English, and his podcasts are incredible, because what he does is he interviews global thought leaders and experts and scientists on what can you do as an individual to ensure that you live a long health span, not lifespan, health span. So often we've got people living longer, right? And they get to maybe 75, 80, then they get 10 years of terrible health. That's because we're keeping people alive longer, but they're not necessarily enjoying good health. So LLAMA is an incredibly powerful podcast. He's a brilliant interviewer, and he's interviewed global thought leaders on how to live long and master aging.
That is a cool topic. I'm going to be checking that out, Malcolm. I'll be checking that out. Question.
Well, I don't think you need to. You're a lot younger than me, but still.
You know what? I think about these things as well. Whenever, I feel like I've got to the age that things start to hurt from time to time, and I'm like, oh, I didn't have that before, and what's going on with the knee here, or what's going on with the shoulder when I do this, and so it is on my mind, and I get things checked quite quickly, and just Good. So that it doesn't go long. So I'm gonna definitely check this podcast out. Question number 2 is if you could give one advice to kind of B2B leaders, IT leaders, people that we've been talking about throughout this podcast, what would that advice be?
Know your buyer, know your customer. Now, sorry, I've waxed lyrical about that already, but if you know your customer and you know their customer well, you will meet their needs or indeed exceed their needs. If you don't know your customer, based on their buying drivers and based on what makes them tick, your competition may well do so without you knowing, and they'll steal them from you. Why? Because they can. And it's all being done digitally. There's a second piece as well as a postscript to that. This is another really, really dynamic space in marketing. And that is this: know who is influencing your customers in terms of their decision-making processes, because we are all being influenced by influencers. I'm not talking of Kim Kardashian. I'm talking of, it might be anyone from Gartner to IDC. It might be an individual who influencer marketing is exploding around the world because of the growth in digital and social platforms. So influencers can kill a deal in an instant. You're about to close a deal. The prospect reaches out to an influencer, either on LinkedIn or Twitter or email, and they ask a question. I'm about to sign with this company, and the influencer can say, whoa, hold on a minute, what? You should be looking at. So influencers, knowing who is influencing your customers, both from a marketing perspective and sales perspective and post-sales perspective, is critical to survival, because they can shape your market, they can kill your market, but more importantly, they can grow your market by advocating for you.
I love that. Okay. Know your influencers. Know who are the influencers of your customers are. I love it. Yeah. Which next question is about influencers, Malcolm. And the next question is, what are the influencers that you follow in the marketing space?
No surprise in the marketing space. I actually follow several of my peers within my own company, SAP, because we do have world-class marketers in our team around the globe. We're all very actively involved in social media, so we're what we call social advocates for SAP globally. So I'm using platforms like Twitter and LinkedIn and other platforms to track what they're saying, track what they feel, as well as having conversations with them. And the other thing, in terms of who influences our customers, there is one particular influencer that I track regularly and constantly because he's prolific in social channels. He's extremely well read by our customers and our prospects. So I want to make sure he's saying nice things about us. And that's a guy called Dennis Howlett. I mean, it's a name that might not mean anything to your audience, but I know that if he says something negative about anything we do, I reach out to him and try and persuade him that there's another view, not in an argumentative way, but if he's only got to say something negative, and I know that thousands of our customers may well see it. He doesn't usually, but but there's an example of where I literally track everything he says. So he might do 6 tweets a day, of which 5 are non-business related. And then there's this gold nugget. There's one business statement, which typically is somewhat contentious.
I mean, you're following your own advice, right? Of know who's influencing your customers. Okay, yeah. I'll definitely look at Dennis Howlett. Last question that I have is, what is something that excites you today about B2B?
I think it's the opportunity to be able to shape your market, leveraging marketing. And again, that's a big topic. What does shape your market mean? In essence, it means you're able to shape the way potential buyers feel about you and your solution using marketing, right? So an example in retail, for instance, and I often reference this, the fashion industry do this to perfection. They shape their own market, right? An example is, when I was young growing up, if I had the tiniest of holes in my Levi's, I throw them away. Nowadays, companies are making millions out of selling jeans with massive holes in them. Why? Because the fashion industry shaped the market. They've shaped demand. I know it's a somewhat blunt and crude analogy, but that's exactly what it is. You are building demand in a market that right now doesn't know it needs you. And it's called shaping. Now, what excites me about that, and it's always been the case, by the way, companies like Apple do this to perfection. So do Microsoft. I think so do we. But the great thing with digital and social platforms is you are able to shape your market leveraging a multitude of platforms using clever marketing tactics and strategies. So that's what excites me. Artificial intelligence, and I say this with a caveat, but artificial intelligence has massive, absolutely massive potential in terms of shaping markets, in terms of messaging and connecting with your target markets. And as we all know, there's a lot of governance discussions going on at government levels right now around the world, and it needs to have. But AI is going to fundamentally transform everything we do. So from a marketing perspective, any marketeer that doesn't understand the power of AI right now better get on the bus pretty quickly because they're going to get left behind.
Get on the bus, the AI bus. All right.
That's it.
No, this is great. This is great.
Yeah.
I love it. Malcolm, this has been an amazing conversation. I really do appreciate it. I appreciate your time and all the insights that you brought to the table. So thank you very much for jumping on the pod.
My great pleasure. Thank you, Shahin.
Hey, it's Alex again from X Growth. Thanks so much for joining us on this episode. If you enjoyed it, we'd love it if you take a moment to rate us on Apple Podcasts. It would really help get the word out to other B2B professionals. If you're hungry for more B2B content, make sure to join our Slack channel at growthcolony.org/Slack, where we share the latest B2B news, tactics, tips, and chat about problems we're facing in the B2B space and find solutions together. That's growthcolony.org/Slack. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you in the next episode.